The Great Depression and the New Deal. In this lecture, I'm going to address Virginia SOL US 2.6D, and during the lecture, it's encouraged that you take notes. A couple of essential questions that you should be able to answer by the conclusion of this lecture are: what were the causes of the Great Depression? How were the lives of Americans affected by the Great Depression? And what were the major features of the New Deal? The crash and the Great Depression. During the 1920s, more and more people bought goods on credit, an arrangement for delaying payment of a loan or purchase. Buying on credit caused many people to acquire large debts. Some people used credit to purchase stocks, which had risen dramatically during the decade. Eventually, buying slowed because many people owed more money than they could afford to pay back. When a massive financial panic led to the stock market crash of 1929, banks began to close. The Federal Reserve System was unable to stop the panic. Millions of Americans lost their life savings. Stocks became almost worthless. Congress passed high tariffs in an effort to protect American industry. But this had the opposite effect. Other nations raised their tariffs and exports began to drop, hastening the nation's descent into the Great Depression. And another thing that happened was that these tariffs that we put on other countries, they put them back on us, and it wasn't just us, our nation, that went into a Great Depression. There was a worldwide depression by the 1930s. During the Depression, 1 in 4 Americans was out of work, farmers' incomes fell rapidly, and many people were left homeless. The New Deal. After taking office as president in 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt worked with Congress to create programs called the New Deal for economic relief, recovery, and reform. To renew Americans' faith in the banking system, Roosevelt declared a bank holiday and promised that only banks that were financially strong would be allowed to open or reopen. Some critics of the New Deal compared it to socialism because it created government-owned businesses, such as the Tennessee Valley Authority, which actually still exists today. In August 1935, Congress passed the Social Security Act, which created a fund for assisting retired workers and the unemployed. Part of the act also helped disabled, low-income, elderly people, and low-income families. Another program that was created was the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which was designed to insure depositors' money when it was put into a bank. Previously, if a bank went out of business, one would lose everything they put into that bank. But under with the FDIC, you would be insured up to a certain amount. Today, the FDIC insures a couple $100,000 in deposits to a bank. So if the bank goes out of business, it will, in fact, the government will make sure that you do get your money back, even if the bank no longer exists. FDR's programs helped working class Americans, and African Americans supported FDR in large numbers, and Roosevelt was reelected in 1936 because of this. In 1935, the Supreme Court struck down some of the New Deal's legislation, ruling that the laws gave the federal government too much power in controlling the nation's economy. A frustrated Roosevelt asked Congress to pass a bill that would add 6 justices to the Supreme Court in order to prevent the court from overturning his programs, but Congress refused. Roosevelt then took actions that ultimately hurt the nation's economy when he cut back on New Deal programs in 1937 to reduce the deficit, believing the economy had recovered. So he wanted to cut off spending. What ultimately happened was things actually got worse. the results of cutting back spending, cutting back on New Deal programs, was disastrous. The economy didn't fully recover until World War II provided thousands of jobs in war industries. So in summary, the optimism of the 1920s concealed problems in the American economic system and attitudes about the role of government in controlling the economy. The Great Depression had a widespread and severe impact on American life, and Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal used government programs to help the nation recover from the Depression. And that is it for this lecture.